The first time my mother knocked on my front door in 11 years, she wasn't carrying flowers. She wasn't carrying an apology either. She was holding a manila folder with my father's name written across the tab in black marker. She looked older than I remembered. Her hair had gone almost completely gray, and the confidence she'd always worn like expensive perfume had faded into something closer to desperation. "I need your signature," she said before I could even say hello. Not "how have you been?" Not "I've missed you." Just 4 words. "I need your signature." I looked down at the folder, then back at her. "I don't sign anything standing in my doorway." For a second, I saw the same expression she'd worn the day she sold my childhood home. The expression that said she'd already decided how the conversation was supposed to end. She smiled anyway. "It won't take long." I didn't move. Instead, I folded my arms and asked the question that had been sitting quietly in the back of my mind since I saw her car pull into my driveway. "Why now?" She hesitated, only for a second, but after spending most of my career auditing financial records, I'd learned something about hesitation. People don't pause before telling the truth. They pause before choosing which version of it to use. "I'm sick," she finally said. "I know." Her eyebrows lifted. "You know." "I knew before you drove here." That was the first time she looked nervous. Because there was something she didn't know. She thought she'd come to ask for my help. She had no idea I'd spent the last 8 years collecting everything she'd left behind. "My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 39 years old, and I work as a senior forensic accountant outside Columbus, Ohio. People imagine my job is exciting because they've watched too many crime shows. Mostly it's spreadsheets, bank statements, property records, tax filings, boxes of old paperwork that everyone else stopped caring about years earlier. The funny thing is, those same habits that built my career eventually saved me from rewriting my own family's history. When people ask why I never throw paperwork away, I usually laugh and blame my profession. The real answer is simpler. My father taught me. He used to say something every April while organizing receipts across our dining room table. "Paper remembers better than people." I didn't understand what he meant until after he died. Our house sat on Maple Ridge Road, about 20 minutes outside Columbus. Nothing about it was impressive. 3 bedrooms. 1 bathroom that always seemed too small. White siding that Dad repainted every few summers. A porch swing he built himself after finding the plans in an old woodworking magazine. If you drove past it, you'd probably forget it existed before reaching the next stop sign. But inside that house, everything that mattered happened. Birthday cakes cooled on the same kitchen counter. Christmas morning started with Dad making cinnamon rolls from scratch because he insisted canned dough cheated the holiday. Every summer, he'd mark my height on the laundry room wall. He refused to paint over those pencil marks. "They're part of the house now," he'd tell Mom. She'd roll her eyes. "They're pencil. They're memories." Looking back, I think they were already arguing about different definitions of value. Dad died on a Thursday morning in early October. Heart attack. No warning. He left for work at 7. By 8:15, a state trooper was standing on our porch. People always ask whether you remember days like that clearly. You don't. Not at first. Memory comes back in pieces. The smell of coffee nobody drank. My mother's coffee cup sitting untouched beside the sink. The clock over the microwave ticking louder than I'd ever noticed before. The neighbor's golden retriever barking while the ambulance pulled away. Tiny details. The important ones disappear for a while. The funeral was 3 days later. Nearly everyone from Dad's construction company came. So did neighbors, church friends, old fishing buddies, men I'd never met who stood in line just to shake my hand and tell me stories about helping Dad rebuild someone's porch after a tornado 20 years earlier. One man looked at me and smiled. "Your father never left anyone stranded." I believed him, because neither had I, at least not then. Mom cried through the service. Real tears. I've never questioned that. Grief isn't always dishonest. Sometimes people genuinely mourn someone and still make decisions that would have broken that person's heart. Those things can exist together. I know that now. I didn't then. About 6 weeks after the funeral, she stopped talking about Dad altogether. His photographs disappeared first, then his fishing rods, then his work boots. One Saturday afternoon, I came home from work and found his recliner sitting in the driveway with a handwritten sign taped to it. Free. I stared at it for a long time. Mom walked outside carrying another box. We don't need all this. I looked at the chair. Dad sat there every night. She shrugged. Your father isn't coming back. It wasn't cruel. Not exactly. Just practical. That's how she explained almost everything. Practical. 3 months later, she announced she was selling the house. Not discussing. Announcing. We were eating soup. Chicken noodle. The kind Dad always made when somebody got sick. She didn't even look up. I accepted an offer this morning. I remember setting my spoon down very carefully. What offer? The house. You already accepted? Yes. You didn't ask me. It isn't your house. I looked around the kitchen. The scratched oak table. The window Dad replaced after a hailstorm. The refrigerator still covered with magnets from family vacations. It was Dad's. No, she said quietly. It was ours. I wish I could tell you I argued brilliantly, that I gave some emotional speech she'd never forget. I didn't. I just asked questions. What happens to Dad's workshop? The buyers don't want it. What about the porch swing? They'll probably remove it. The height marks? They're just pencil. Every answer felt smaller than the last. The closing happened in February. Snow covered the yard. I parked across the street because I couldn't bring myself to watch strangers carry boxes into the place I'd spent 26 years calling home. Mom didn't seem emotional. She signed paperwork, collected a cashier's check, locked the front door one final time. Then she handed the keys to the realtor. I watched from my car. She never looked back. Not once. 2 weeks later, she moved to Arizona. Retirement community. Warm weather. Golf courses. New friends. A fresh start. She called twice that first year, mostly to tell me how much sunshine she had. Eventually, even those calls stopped. Birthdays became text messages. Then nothing. By the 4th year, we were strangers connected only by old photographs neither of us displayed anymore. Life has a way of filling empty spaces, whether you invite it to or not. I threw myself into work, earned my CPA, later specialized in forensic accounting. I married Ethan, a high school history teacher who believed every problem could be solved by making coffee first. We bought a modest house, had one daughter, Emma. She inherited my father's curiosity. Every visit to our garage became an excuse to build something together. Birdhouses, shelves, plant boxes. Sometimes we'd sand pieces of wood for an hour without finishing anything. I never minded. Dad used to say projects weren't measured by how fast they ended. They were measured by who stayed beside you while you worked. One Saturday, Emma asked why Grandpa wasn't in any of Grandma's pictures. She was 8. Children notice absences adults stop seeing. I told her the truth. Some people remember differently. She frowned. That's weird. It is. Did Grandma love Grandpa? I thought about that longer than I expected. I think she did. Then why did she get rid of everything? I didn't answer. Because I still couldn't. Around that same time, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived from Franklin County. Property Assessment Office. Wrong address. Forwarded to me because my name still appeared on an old utility account from years earlier. Inside was paperwork connected to our old house. I almost threw it away. Instead, Habit 1. I opened it. That decision changed everything. Because buried inside routine county correspondence was a document I'd never seen before. One signature. One date. One attached affidavit. And one sentence that made me sit down before I finished reading it. The house hadn't been sold because my mother needed money. It had been sold because she'd promised someone else something months before my father died. And suddenly, the story I believed for over a decade no longer made sense. I must have read that affidavit 6 or 7 times before I noticed my coffee had gone cold. People assume forensic accountants spend their lives uncovering million-dollar frauds. Most of us don't. We find ordinary things that don't add up. A missing signature. A transfer that happened 2 days too early. A document filed in the wrong order. Small details. That's usually where the truth hides. This was one of those moments. The affidavit had been signed 34 days before my father died. Not afterward. Before. It was attached to paperwork involving a private purchase agreement connected to the property. Not the sale itself. The preparation for it. I wasn't looking at evidence that my mother had decided to sell after becoming a widow. I was looking at evidence that the process had already begun while my father was still alive. That didn't prove she'd done anything wrong. But it proved one thing. The story she told everyone, including me, was incomplete. For the rest of that week, I couldn't focus. Numbers blurred together. A manufacturing audit I'd been leading took twice as long because my mind kept drifting back to Maple Ridge Road. Finally, Friday afternoon, my supervisor looked over my cubicle wall. "You've balanced the same worksheet 3 times. I know. You missed something. I'm not sure yet." He smiled. That's usually how the interesting ones start. That weekend, after Emma went to bed, I carried the county paperwork into the garage. Not because there was better light, because that's where Dad always sorted documents. Workbench, old radio, coffee in a chipped mug. It somehow felt wrong to read anything about him anywhere else. Ethan found me an hour later. "You've been out here a while." I handed him the affidavit. He read quietly, then looked up. "So, she was already planning to sell?" "I think so. Does it change anything?" "I don't know." He leaned against the workbench. "I've watched you solve enough financial cases to recognize that face." "What face?" "The one that says you're not done asking questions." He knew me too well. Monday morning before work, I drove to the county recorder's office. Government buildings all smell the same. Paper, floor polish, old heating systems. The woman behind the records counter couldn't have been older than 25. "What can I help you find?" I slid the affidavit across. "I need everything connected to this property." She typed for several minutes, then frowned. "There are archive files. Can I see them?" "Give me about 15 minutes. It took 23. She returned, pushing a gray records cart stacked with thick folders. "You'll want conference room B." I spent almost 4 hours reading. Property tax records, mortgage releases, survey maps, permit applications. Most of it meant nothing, until I reached a folder labeled estate planning. Inside were photocopies of correspondence between my parents and their attorney. The date stopped me. 9 months before Dad died. 8 months. 7. Meeting after meeting. Then, one letter. Typed. Signed by the attorney. Addressed to both of them. It referenced revisions my father had requested. Requested. Not completed. I paid for certified copies before leaving. Professional habit. Never trust your memory when paper exists. On my way home, I didn't call my mother. I called someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 12 years. Harold Benson. Dad's best friend. They'd worked construction together for nearly 30 years. He answered on the 4th ring. "Claire." His voice sounded exactly the same. Older. Slower. But unmistakably Harold. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "You could never bother me." There was a pause. "Everything all right?" "I need to ask you something about Dad." Silence. Not uncomfortable. Careful. "I'll put coffee on." Harold still lived in the same farmhouse. Same pickup truck. Same wind chimes on the porch. Some people age without changing. He was one of them. He poured coffee before either of us spoke. Then he looked at the folder I'd brought. "You found something." "I think I did." He adjusted his glasses and studied the affidavit. His shoulders dropped. "So," he said quietly, "you know." "No. I know something." He stared out the kitchen window for a long moment. "I always wondered if she'd tell you." "Tell me what?" Instead of answering, he stood and disappeared down the hallway. When he returned, he carried a small cardboard box. Old. Dusty. My father's handwriting covered one side. HB. Harold Benson. He placed it carefully on the table. "Your dad left this with me." I felt my heartbeat change. "When?" "About 2 months before he passed." My mouth suddenly felt dry. He said if anything ever happened to him, Harold looked down, and if certain conversations never took place, I was supposed to give it to you. I opened the box slowly. Inside were notebooks. 3 of them. Construction estimates. Expense logs. Routine paperwork. Then, a sealed envelope. My name. Written in Dad's handwriting. I hadn't seen his handwriting in over a decade. I just stared at it. Harold quietly stood. "I'm going outside." "You don't have to." "I think I do." He closed the kitchen door behind him, leaving me alone with my father's last letter. The envelope wasn't dramatic. No wax seal. No lengthy goodbye. Just ordinary white stationery folded in thirds. My hand shook anyway. Inside were only 2 pages. The first line stopped me. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I ran out of time. I closed my eyes, then started again. Dad wrote the way he talked. Simple. Direct. No unnecessary words. He told me he loved me, that he was proud of the woman I'd become. Then the letter changed. He wrote that he and Mom had been arguing for almost a year. Not about money, about the house. Mom wanted to sell after retirement. Dad refused. He wanted the property to stay in the family, especially the workshop, especially the land. He'd even met with an attorney about placing it into a trust after his death. But, according to the letter, they never finished the paperwork, because Mom kept postponing meetings. There was one sentence I read 3 times. If your mother ever tells you I agreed to sell the house, I need you to know I never did. I folded the letter, opened it again, read it once more. Paper remembers better than people. He'd been trying to leave me proof. There was something else inside the envelope. A folded photograph. I'd never seen it before. Dad standing beside the porch swing, one hand resting on the chain, smiling. On the back he'd written, "Home isn't lumber. It's promises." I don't mind admitting that was the first time I'd cried since opening any of those documents. Not loudly, just quietly, at Harold's kitchen table, holding 20-year-old paper that suddenly felt heavier than wood. When Harold came back inside, he didn't ask what the letter said. He already knew. Instead, he asked something different. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know." He nodded. "Good." I looked up. "Good. Angry people make quick decisions." He smiled sadly. "Your father never trusted quick decisions." Before I left, Harold said something I didn't fully understand. "Talk to Eleanor." "Eleanor? The attorney? Dad's attorney?" He nodded. "She's retired now." "Why?" He looked toward the window. "Because she remembers everything." Finding Eleanor wasn't difficult. Retirement hadn't taken her far. She still lived 10 minutes from the old law office. She invited me over the following Tuesday afternoon. Her living room was lined with bookshelves. Estate law, property law, family law. 40 years of helping families prepare for futures they hoped would never arrive. She remembered me immediately. "You have your father's eyes." People had told me that my whole life. For the first time, it felt comforting. I showed her the letter. She read it without interrupting, then carefully placed it on the coffee table. "He expected you might come." My heart skipped. "What?" He couldn't finish everything he wanted. "What do you mean?" She stood, walked toward a small filing cabinet, unlocked it, removed a single blue folder. "I've kept this longer than most attorneys would." She sat back down. "There are rules about confidentiality." She smiled gently. "There are also moments when the truth matters more." She handed me the folder. Inside were meeting notes, handwritten, each one dated, each one documenting discussions between my parents. Dad consistently wanted the property preserved. Mom consistently wanted liquidity, cash, freedom, travel, retirement. Neither position was unreasonable. Until I reached the final page. Eleanor had written one sentence after their last meeting. "Client expressed concern spouse may proceed without honoring mutual understanding if opportunity arises." I looked up. "Dad said this." She nodded. "He was worried. Why didn't he finish the trust?" She sighed. "He thought there would be more time." I drove home in silence. Not because I was angry. Because I was reorganizing 20 years of memories. Conversations that hadn't made sense suddenly did. Arguments I'd overheard. Doors closing. Late-night discussions stopping when I entered the room. None of it had been about retirement. It had been about the house. Always the house. That night, after Emma went to sleep, Ethan found me sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers. "How many documents is that now?" I stopped counting. He smiled. "That's when I know you're close." I looked at him. Close to what? The part where the whole story changes. I wish he hadn't been right. Because the next morning, the phone rang. Arizona. My mother's number. The first call in almost 3 years. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered. Her voice sounded unusually soft. "Claire." There was a pause. "I've been meaning to call." I looked down at my father's letter lying beside my coffee mug. Somehow, I already knew this conversation wasn't really about me, or about missing me, or even about Dad. It was about something she needed. I just didn't know what. Yet, I answered on the 4th ring. "Hello." There was a pause long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Then my mother's voice came through. "Claire, it's Mom." It sounded smaller than I remembered. Not warmer, just smaller. "I know. I wasn't sure you'd answer." I almost didn't. Silence settled between us. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that forms after years of saying nothing at all. Finally, she cleared her throat. "How's Emma?" I glanced toward the living room where my daughter was coloring on the floor while Ethan helped her with a school project. "She's 9 now. Already. Time keeps moving." "It does." Another silence. Then she finally reached the reason she'd called. "My doctor's found something." I didn't interrupt. "I have congestive heart failure." Her voice cracked just enough to sound believable. "They're treating it, but it's progressing faster than they expected." "I'm sorry to hear that. I've been thinking about family." There it was. Not grief. Not guilt. Need. People rarely begin with what they actually want. They circle around it first. She did exactly that. "I've made mistakes. I waited. I know we haven't been close. Still waiting. I'd like to come see you." I looked at my father's letter lying beside my laptop. "If that's what you want." "It is." She hesitated. "I'll need somewhere to stay." There it was. The truth. Or at least the first layer of it. She arrived 2 weeks later. A silver rental SUV pulled into our driveway just after noon. I watched from the kitchen window. She took longer than usual getting out. Slower. Thinner. Older. Illness had clearly changed her. But something else hadn't changed. Before she hugged me, before she asked about Emma, her eyes drifted toward our house, assessing it, the size, the neighborhood, the landscaping, the kind of glance that measures rather than admires. It lasted less than 3 seconds. Most people would have missed it. I didn't. Emma ran outside first. "Hi, Grandma." Mom smiled, a genuine smile. For a moment I saw the woman who used to braid my hair before school. She hugged Emma tightly. "I've missed you." Emma looked back at me. "You have." Children have a way of asking questions adults avoid. Mom laughed softly. "I should have visited sooner." Emma nodded. "You should have." No judgment. Just fact. Dinner was polite. Ethan carried most of the conversation. Teaching. Weather. Ohio winters. Arizona summers. Mom talked about doctor appointments. Medication. Physical therapy. Everything except the past. Until dessert. She set her fork down. "I drove past Maple Ridge yesterday. My stomach tightened. The old house." She nodded. "They painted it blue." "I know. It doesn't look like ours anymore." I didn't answer, because it hadn't been ours for a long time. The next morning she asked if we could talk privately. We sat on the back porch, coffee between us, birds moving through the maple trees. I haven't been completely honest. I almost smiled. That was the understatement of the decade. She folded her hands. The retirement community raised their fees. "I see. My medical costs have increased." I nodded. She looked directly at me. "I've almost exhausted my savings." There it was. Another layer. Not the last one, but closer. "I'm sorry. I may need some help." She couldn't quite say the word. "Money. People asking for it rarely do." "I'll think about what I can do." She looked relieved, then surprised. "That's it. What did you expect?" "I thought you'd be angry." "I've spent too many years being angry." That part was true. Anger eventually becomes heavy. Questions stay lighter. That afternoon while Mom napped, I opened my laptop. Professional habit. Whenever money entered a conversation, facts came first. Within an hour I'd confirmed something strange. The retirement community she described wasn't in financial trouble. Its fees had increased. Slightly. Nothing close to what she'd implied. That wasn't proof she'd lied. But it meant her explanation didn't balance. And when explanations don't balance, you keep looking. 3 days later she asked another question. Casually. Almost too casually. "Do you still have any paperwork from your father?" I looked up. "What kind of paperwork?" "Oh, old documents." "Why?" "I was just wondering." She stirred her tea without drinking it. "I realized there are things I never organized." I smiled politely. "I've kept quite a bit." She stopped stirring. "Really? I work in accounting. I suppose that makes sense." She looked away. Too quickly. That night I couldn't sleep. Around midnight I walked into my office. Open Dad's blue folder. Read Eleanor's notes again. Then Harold's box. Then Dad's letter. Something bothered me. Not what I knew. What I didn't. If Mom wanted paperwork now. Which paperwork? And why now? The answer arrived the following afternoon. Completely by accident. Mom had fallen asleep in the guest room while watching television. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Normally I would have ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. The screen lit up. One name. Martin Wells. The preview read only 6 words. Did she sign anything yet? I froze. The phone stopped vibrating. The screen went dark. I never touched it. I didn't need to. I'd already read enough. Someone else was waiting. For my decision. That evening Mom announced she was going to bed early. As soon as her bedroom door closed, Ethan looked across the living room. You saw that message. I did. What are you thinking? I stared toward the hallway. I'm not the first person she's talked to. The next morning I called Harold. Have you ever heard of Martin Wells? He was quiet. Too quiet. Finally he sighed. I was hoping that name never came back. My pulse quickened. You know him. I know exactly who he is. Who? He used to own the development company that wanted your father's land. I sat down slowly. What? 15 years ago, they wanted to build luxury homes along Maple Ridge. I remembered vague conversations. Neighbors protesting. Signs near the highway. They offered good money. Dad refused. He refused immediately. I looked toward the guest room where Mom was still asleep. Harold's next sentence made every document I'd collected suddenly connect. Your mother didn't. For the next 24 hours I said nothing. People think silence means uncertainty. Sometimes silence is preparation. I wanted evidence, not assumptions. Dad deserved that much. Monday morning I drove back to Eleanor. She listened without interrupting. When I mentioned Martin Wells, her expression changed. You found that name. So you know it too. She nodded slowly. I wish I didn't. She opened another file cabinet. This time she hesitated before removing a thin envelope. I debated destroying these years ago. What are they? Correspondence. She handed them to me. The first letter was from Martin Wells Development. The date caught my eye immediately. 8 months before Dad died. It offered to purchase our property. Nearly 3 times market value. The second letter thanked my mother for productive discussions. Not my parents. My mother. The third letter was never answered. Because Dad had instructed Eleanor to reject the offer. Officially. In writing. So Dad never agreed. No. And Mom. Eleanor folded her hands. She believed selling was practical. I almost laughed. There was that word again. Practical. The same word she'd used while giving away Dad's chair. The same word she'd used while selling our home. Practical. When I got home, Mom was sitting on the porch with Emma. They were planting herbs in little clay pots. For a second, they looked happy. Normal. It almost made me question everything. Then Mom looked up. You've been out. I had errands. She smiled. I was thinking. Here it came. Maybe we should go through your father's things together. I met her eyes. I already have. Something flickered across her face. Not guilt. Recognition. She understood. I knew more than she expected. Just not how much. That evening, after Emma was asleep, I placed every document across the dining room table. Dad's letter. Eleanor's notes. The development offers. County records. Affidavit. Property history. For 3 hours I built a timeline. Dates. Meetings. Offers. Conversations. One column after another. When I finished, the picture was painfully clear. Dad hadn't died and left Mom to make impossible decisions. They'd been fighting over that land for almost a year. His death had simply removed the last person standing between her and the sale. The realization didn't make me hate her. Oddly, it made me understand her. She wasn't evil. She was impatient. She believed money solved uncertainty. Dad believed Roots did. They'd spent 40 years loving each other while disagreeing about what security looked like. Then one of them died. The other got to choose. The following morning Mom walked into the kitchen, carrying another manila folder. The same one she'd held on my porch weeks earlier. I need to ask you something. I looked at it. I know. She sat down. It's about Arizona. I waited. The doctors think assisted living would be safer. She slid the folder toward me. Inside were financial documents, loan paperwork, power of attorney forms, a request to refinance my home, using my income. I looked up. You want me to guarantee your debt? Tears filled her eyes. I don't have anyone else. I believe that part. Completely. Then I noticed one line near the back. Existing creditor, Martin Wells Financial Holdings. Not a bank. Martin. The same Martin. I closed the folder. Quietly. Very carefully. And for the first time since she'd arrived, I understood why she'd really come. It had never been about illness alone. It had never been about reconciliation. Years earlier, she'd sold the one thing my father begged her to protect. Now, the man she trusted with her future owned the debt she couldn't pay. And she needed the daughter she'd left behind to rescue her from the choice she'd made.